Story 1. I always hated having hot dogs cut up in macaroni. I thought it was poor people food and that I was above that. However, now that I am grown, I have discovered that it is not only delicious, but it really is poor people food, and I am not above it. Story 2. Wait for it. Beef steaks. I grew up in a family that didn't really barbecue much, and my mom likes her steaks beyond dead. So whenever we cooked steaks, they were dry and almost inedible. Then, I went to a friend's house whose father cooked them properly when I was about 16, and my life was changed. Story 3. Tell me why it feels like everyone's mothers boiled vegetables excessively until around 2010. I swear everyone hated vegetables, and then we all collectively realized, oh wait, if you roast them with even the smallest bit of seasoning, they're delicious. Why were we all eating barely salted boiled vegetables? Story 4. I spent my whole life disliking tomatoes. I'm in my 40s now and just started giving them a chance a few years ago. I love them more and more with each delicious sandwich. Story 5. Vegetables. I had a fine heap of lovely roasted broccoli with dinner today. A bit of olive oil, salt, garlic. Absolutely gorgeous. I know my taste buds have changed since I was a kid, but I wouldn't want to eat plain boiled broccoli now either. Story 6. Brussels sprouts. TV shows back then always criticized them, but when they are well seasoned and cooked, they are honestly better than the main course sometimes, extra points if they're cheesy. Yummy. Story 7. Yogurt. All I was exposed to as a kid was Trix yogurt and Go-Gurt. Both were overly sweet and sort of acidic in flavor, but I love plain Greek yogurt as an adult. Story 8. Freaking coconut. I hated the smell, the texture, the taste. I would be comically shocked when other people enjoyed it. I don't know how or when, but out of nowhere, it became my favorite taste and smell. I will buy any food or drink that has coconut. All of my perfumes, candles, sprays, coconut. I'm not partial to the texture, but I cannot understand what I hated when I was a kid or how it changed so drastically. Story 9. Corn. As a child, my mother only made the canned version, and instead of straining it and adding butter, salt, and pepper, she would serve it in its own juice, also known as the gray water it was cooked in, with a slotted spoon. Now that I think of it, most vegetables became a revelation once I discovered the fresh versions. Story 10. Just the usual. Didn't like vegetables and fish as a kid, loved sugary foods. Now, I find vegetables to be amazing, and I find myself needing to reduce sugar in recipes for them to be palatable. Story 11. I hated mustard as a child and love it as an adult. Conversely, I put ketchup on everything as a child and cannot stand it as an adult. It is way too sweet. If I am going for a ketchup-type flavor, I use barbecue sauce instead. Story 12. Not so much love, but they aren't too bad. Mashed potatoes. I used to hate them when I was younger due to my sensory disorder, and the texture really made me feel like I was going to throw up. Now, I actually don't mind. They can be pretty tasty depending on who makes them. Story 13. Here is the revised text, optimized for Azure text-to-speech AI. Things I now like and did not as a kid include mustard, kale, specifically in the traditional German way, spinach, broccoli, salmon, and mandarins. Things I now dislike are Nutella, liquid/clear honey, anything from McDonald's except the occasional nuggets, and most gummy candy. I wouldn't say I dislike, but I'm also not big on apples anymore. Never have I and never will I like Brussels sprouts. The smell of them being cooked makes me gag from 3 rooms away. And remember, kids, tomatoes are disgusting. Story 14. Capsicum, also known as bell pepper. I despised it as a child, but as an adult, I've been slowly training myself to eat it, and now I actually like the red ones. Still, I can't stand the green though. Story 15. Mushrooms, but I trained myself over 15 years to like them. It wasn't a sudden thing. Coffee, but I pretty much just woke up one day and thought, actually, bitter brown liquid sounds wonderful. And I was right. It's kind of weird when I'd spent 29 years disliking even the smell. Avocados and a small handful of other things that I didn't really give a real try to as a kid for various reasons. But then when I did, they were great. Story 16. Not necessarily a food, but mustard. I absolutely hated it as a kid. Then, one day as an adult, my mom gave me her leftover McNuggets with the honey mustard sauce. I was too lazy to get barbecue sauce, so I tried it, and now I absolutely love it. It's my go-to dipping sauce. And I even put mustard on things like bratwurst too. Story 17. I recently learned that my distaste for English muffins stemmed from them being fed to me as a child with little to no butter. My boyfriend loaded one up with a significant amount, and I am converted. Story 18. There are a few, but one I recently rediscovered was cottage cheese. As a kid, I could never get past the first spoonful, but now I regularly buy it and have it as a snack. Just some salt and pepper, and it's great. Story 19. Hated might not be the most accurate word, as I was only offered it one time and refused to touch it, but sauerkraut. Now, I love the stuff. I will even get the cheap, off-brand varieties and snack on it right out of the can. Story 20. Spaghetti. It always gave me acid reflux as a kid, and it was really bland. But when I got older, I finally realized my mom bought the cheapest sauce and other things, but she was providing for a family of 4. Story 21. Chili. I also hated steak because, as it turns out, I had better taste as a child. My dad would cook it past well done, and I'd be chewing forever. I thought all vegetables except corn were gross, too, because they would boil them until they turned to mush. Story 22. Pickles. I hated pickles as a child and always thought the folks eating a pickle in a bag at sporting events were gross. Fast forward to adulthood, and I love them. Story 23. Asparagus. Granted, as a child, my only exposure to it was canned, which I still cannot stand. Slimy, soft, and gross. However, fresh asparagus is one of the greatest vegetables around. Story 24. Pasta. I hated it all my life and would refuse to even eat a bite. Since then, I have lost my sense of smell, and my tastes have changed. Now, I'm a big pasta lover. Laugh out loud. Story 25. Sauerkraut. I was so disgusted by it as a kid that I didn't make my parents' Polish food at all after moving from home. Fast forward to roughly 20 years later, to a week ago, I made kielbasa and pierogies with sauerkraut for my wife for the first time. Holy moly! How have I avoided sauerkraut for so long? Story 26. Most vegetables. I love my mom and appreciated that she cooked for a large family, which included picky eaters, but she never met a vegetable she couldn't boil to mush. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed vegetables until I was cooking for myself. Story 27. Brussels sprouts and Spam. My mom would put thick slices of Spam on a cooking sheet, top each slice with 1 pineapple ring and 1 whole clove, and bake that. I had no idea Spam could be crispy until my husband cooked it. Story 28. Please. Still don't like the mushy canned ones, but frozen ones thawed in a pea salad? Delicious. Broccoli is another one. I didn't enjoy it cooked as mush. Sorry, Mom. But now I eat it raw all the time. Or, gently cooked. Story 29. I didn't eat eggs at all. It most likely came from when I was in elementary school, seeing another kid throw up scrambled eggs, which still looked like scrambled eggs all over the place. But I also didn't eat hard-boiled eggs either. My first time finally eating eggs was in my 20s because someone had made breakfast for me, and I didn't want to be rude. Thankfully, they were good and set me on a love for eggs. Story 30. Eggs. When I was in middle school, I decided that I hated eggs for about 3 years. But only hot eggs. Deviled eggs, egg salad, and hard-boiled eggs, as long as they were refrigerated for a while, were fine. Preteens are weird. Story 31. I grew up with a mom who I didn't realize has food aversions, and spitting out food because you're sick of it being in your mouth is not something most adults do. So, anything white was off the table. Very basic seasonings. Nothing really beyond spaghetti, barbecue, and McDonald's. I really was raised with this attitude that most food is gross. Her boyfriend completely opened up food for me when I was a teenager. Shellfish, mushrooms, sauces, buffalo burgers, Alfredo. I am quite adventurous now with my food, and I will try anything once. Sushi, alligator, anything. Story 32. So many foods. Turns out I wasn't the picky eater my mom thought I was. I just didn't like unseasoned meat and boiled vegetables. After I started college, she started taking cooking classes and is now an excellent cook, which I appreciate. But part of me will always think, damn, Mom, couldn't you have learned this earlier? Story 33. I wouldn't say love, but butter. When I was 4, I thought a scoop of butter that was on my pancakes was a little ice cream, so I put it all in my mouth. Learned the hard way, I guess. But I didn't consume butter for 10 years after that. Story 34. Garlic. My father used to eat it in huge amounts and he sweated a lot. That was such a repulsive combination. After I moved out of my family home, I was reintroduced to garlic as a spice, and now I love it, still in moderation, though. Story 35. Iced cappuccinos from Tim Hortons. Funny enough, I found they had a disgusting taste when I was very young. There was a time when they were absolutely peak, around when Supremes used to exist. Now, they're back to being mediocre and watered down. Story 36. Pretty much everything that isn't meat, cheese, or the general carbohydrate group. Took a very long time, but when I moved to China, I didn't speak Chinese at the time, so my best chance was recognizing characters that were similar or the same in Japanese and just going with the flow. Turns out I just thought I didn't like most things. You'd be hard-pressed to find a food I actually despise. Story 37. So many. Tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, and onions, even lettuce. Lots more. I remember my mother making me sit at the table for hours until my father got home because I refused to eat a bowl of tomato soup. I called it paint soup. It tasted so bad. After hours of waiting, she let me go minutes before he got home. Guess it was a game of chicken. Story 38. Steak and hamburgers. As a kid, they were always burnt and the cheapest cuts. As an adult, I learned I could buy good cuts of steak, and when cooked properly, it's one of my top 5 favorite foods. Story 39. Quite literally everything. Onions, Brussels sprouts, cucumbers, seafood, steak, etc. I ate spaghetti noodles and Parmesan for a good portion of my childhood. Story 40. Bitter gourd, also known as crocodile vegetable. Mum used to cook it as a flash curry. I used to hate it as a child. Now it's delicious. I miss it so much. Story 41. Broccoli and mushrooms were 2 of the foods I hated most as a child, and now they are 2 of my absolute favorite things, and I generally eat multiple pounds of each every week. Story 42. Traditionally, you give your chitlins and tripe to someone else to clean and cook for you. At first glance, the way it looked was unappealing to me, so I never tried it. Now, I can't get enough of it, and I believe that's because of the way the person cooks ours. It nearly melts like butter in your mouth. Glad I gave it a chance. Story 43. Olives, I guess they tasted too bitter for my young mouth. I loved almost all of the food I got at home and was never a picky eater. However, olives are the one thing that I never got into, but now will get as a snack, specifically filled olives. Usually, I get green olives filled with garlic. Mushrooms I didn't like as a kid, and as I've gotten older, I still don't like them. I don't hate them. They just have no taste to me, and the texture is a bit weird. You can make a great tasting sauce using mushrooms, but then it's not really just mushrooms. Story 44. Beef liver, chicken liver, liver pate. I don't eat them as often as I would like because I am the only one in my house that likes that stuff, and my wife hates cooking them. Story 45. Mayonnaise, onions, olives. I am sure there is more, but those were the top 3. I absolutely refuse to touch anything made with them, and now I order extra on everything. Story 46. Brussels sprouts, but only because the people who served them to me boiled them to death, so that the only flavor left in them was bitterness. When roasted, they are yummy. With a splash of balsamic vinegar, they are scrumptious. Story 47. All the foods you could describe as slimy or mushy, such as vegetables and mushrooms, like roasted peppers, eggplants, mushrooms, zucchinis, and so on. I'm not sure why I hated them, but that changed when I turned 16. I totally love them now. Story 48. I did not hate any food as a kid. We were poor. I was grateful for any food I got. A more reasonable question for me is, what food did I love as a kid that I hate as an adult? Here are some: beef brains, bear meat, grits, and garbanzo beans. Story 49. Olives. In the yesteryears, those devils would make me choke and nearly throw up. Now I can't get enough. On pizza, salads, or on their own stuffed with smoked goat cheese, I do love me an olive whenever I get a chance. Story 50. Honestly, a ton of stuff. My mom was such a horrible cook, I thought I was the pickiest eater in the world until I got out on my own. Turns out asparagus is freaking delicious when it's not from a can and cooked for so long all of the water has evaporated. Story 51. I have a weird relationship with onions. As a kid, I absolutely hated that slimy yet crunchy texture. As an adult, I still strongly dislike the texture, but I appreciate the flavor of onions so much that I just put up with it. Now, I'd say you can barely even make savory foods taste good without onions. Story 52. Cucumbers were like the water of the food world, and I hated anything that didn't have tons of flavor to it. Now, I love cucumbers and water. So refreshing. Story 53. Grilled chicken. I grew up with my parents always overcooking meat in general, but grilled chicken breast was even worse than an over-well-done steak to me. Turns out all you need is some butter and proper cooking techniques, and it's pretty good. Story 54. My German grandmother was very fond of sauerkraut, but as a child, I hated the stuff. Now that I'm grown, my mouth waters at the thought of the bitter taste it offers. Shockingly, my 10-year-old actually likes it. I suppose I lucked out.